So I guess my plan is maybe give you guys a little background, 10 or 15-minute background on Vology, the company that I founded about 10 years ago, who we are, what we do for a living, maybe tie some of that back to passion, perseverance, and performance, and then really open up to your questions to see, you know, I don't know, everybody's here for a different reason, so I'd rather, you know, try and answer questions that you guys might have individually than me dictate the content. Does that sound good? So about 10 years ago, I founded a company called, it was originally called Network Liquidators. Prior to founding that, I was running a software development company in Palm Harbor. We were building web applications to automate business processes for folks. An example was we had a platform that kind of, it was one interface where you could take products and sell them on eBay or launch them to your own e-commerce storefront. And we sold that platform to 500 or 600 different companies, and we're building a nice business off of that. And one Friday, one of my developers, a guy named Scott Hooton, came to me and he said, "Barry, I need to borrow $3,000. He said, "But I'll give you $3,600 back next Friday." I was like, "Well, what are you doing?" I was a little concerned. I'm not a banker like Steve, but you know, it seemed like a pretty good deal. So I inquired. It turns out all he was doing was buying 6 used Cisco switches from St. Pete College for $500 a piece, and he already had them resold to a company up in Syracuse, New York, for $950 a piece. So near as I could tell, he wasn't breaking any laws. So I lent him the money, made a few bucks, and that's how I was introduced to the used equipment resale business. So now think about this time frame wise. This was 2001, 2002, so the dot-com bubble just burst, right? So there's all sorts of companies that downsized, went out of business, you know, just really a lot of distress situations. There was equipment everywhere. There were a lot of engineers, IT guys, that instead of getting a last paycheck, they got a trunk full of equipment. You know, so there were situations like that. There was just no shortage of stuff. So I started looking into the industry and really liked what we saw for a couple of reasons. The first is there were a lot of companies in the business, probably 300 at the time, all spread across the country, but they were all very local. They were very, you know, they served a local market. It didn't seem like anyone had a, you know, kind of a national footprint. It also didn't seem like anyone had, you know, was the dominant player in the space online. So all those things, you know, kind of added up to what looked like a pretty good opportunity to me. So first year in business, 2002, we did about $1 million in revenue. The second year we did $4 million. The third year we did $7 million, and the fourth year we did $10 million. So from 2002 to 2005, we grew it from $1 million a year in revenue to $10 million. So that's pretty impressive growth for the first 4 years of a business. The good news is we only almost went out of business once or twice in that first 4 years. So so the second year, you know, that we were in business, I'll tell you one quick story. You would think something as easy as accepting credit cards for stuff, you know, accepting credit cards for products would be something simple. But we were selling stuff over the phone. And we were selling used equipment, and our average ticket price was kind of high, so we were having trouble finding people to allow us to accept credit cards. Because they're qualifying questions. First, they want to know if the card holder's present. So if you're actually swiping the card, that reduces the risk on the merchant, so that's what they like. We say, no, we're selling the stuff over the phone. And they're saying, you know, and then they ask, well, what's your average ticket size? Well, our average sale is about $3,000. That's another high-risk area for them. So I'm combining selling stuff over the phone with an average price of $3,000. Very few people got past those 2 questions. If I did get them past those 2 questions, the third question was, well, what do you sell? Used IT equipment, and there's no box at merchant companies for used IT equipment. So it took a while, but we finally got a processor to work with us. It was a reseller of, I guess, Payment Tech, which is one of the largest processors of credit cards in the country. And he said, look, your volume's not going to be a problem. You know, you're doing 100,000 a month in credit card transactions. It's no problem. I get what you're doing. You know, we're all good. So I get on board. We're selling stuff. I'm processing my credit cards. My cash is showing up. And then all of a sudden, my deposits stop showing up. So, you know, I started the business with about $150,000. That was kind of my bankroll when we got into, you know, starting the business. By the middle of 2003, so I'm in business just over a year at this point, I've got the credit card company owes me about $100,000. So virtually my entire bankroll is now tied up with the credit card company. I get a phone call and they say, yeah, we're going to have to terminate your merchant account. I'm like, oh. I'm like, all right, back to the drawing board. Got to find a different way to, to do this. So things are going well. I mean, I've grown a business, doing a few $100,000s a month in revenue, but I can't accept credit cards, so I can't take payments from my customers. Then they drop the bombshell on me. The $100,000 we owe you, we'll give it to you in 6 months. Seriously, 6 months. So almost out of business. 12 months into this, everything's going great, and a situation completely outside of my control almost killed us. So so the road from $1 million to $10 million wasn't easy. As we got to to that $10 million revenue level in 2005, that's when I realized the business was growing beyond a size that I was comfortable running. I didn't really have a management team. I didn't have people that had grown businesses before. I'd grown some stuff, but that was kind of the ceiling of size, if you will, that I'd grown things to. So I felt like I needed help, which was a good strategy. Go get people that are smarter than you to come in and help you grow a business, right? So it was good. But then through this process, as I was building out my team, I hired a CFO, a VP of Business Development, and a VP of Sales. And I was really focused on the resumes at the time. And I was enamored by resumes. If you worked for companies that grew, I assumed that they grew because you were there. So I made the connection. It was very simple, So, oh look, he was at Pods when it was 2 million, and when he left it was 100 million. It must have been all him. Oh, he was at K-Force when they were 50 million, and he left they were 500 million. It must have been all him. And so it was when I saw people that had experience with that type of hyper growth, it seemed like a perfect fit. Now, what I wasn't taking into consideration is whether they could actually execute and do their jobs well, roll up their sleeves, and act and behave in the way you have to when you're growing a business. So 2006, me and my new team grew the business from 10 million in 05 to 17 million in 06. And then the next year is when really the trouble hit. 2006, we did 17 million in revenue. 2007, we did 40. So we grew from 17 million to 40 million in 1 year. And it happened almost happened from December to January, because our organic growth was really stepping up. We acquired another company that brought another $1 million a month of revenue in. And like the month of January, everything broke. Every business process that I put in place, every policy procedure thing we had was, had a manual element to it that just fell apart with the increased volume. So 2007 is the only year in our 10-year history that we lost money, and we didn't do it by halves. We lost a lot of money. We were just hemorrhaging stuff. I had my CFO didn't send invoices out to my customers for the first 6 weeks of the year. You want a surefire way to create a cash flow problem? Don't send invoices to your customers. Now, by the way, I can point the finger at him, but obviously this is my fault. I mean, I'm the CEO, I'm the founder, it's my company. That wasn't happening, that's on me. I had the wrong team. I hired the guy, I put him in that role. I didn't have the right checks and balances in place to make sure that things that should have been happening in the normal course of business were happening. And it was a tough time. So 2007 is really the time. That was the year that we almost went out of business. Now, think about the backdrop of the economy in 2007. Things were starting to go in the wrong direction, so we're dealing with that at the same time as well. It didn't take me long to realize that the team that I'd assembled in 2005 and 2006 was not the right team. So over the next 18 months, really replaced the entire executive team of the company. And there's a guy who's my right-hand man today. I hired him in September of 2007. His name's Steve Torres. Hired him as the CFO of the company, and he agreed to come on board. He'd worked at Tech Data, Jabil Circuit, and Cineverse before. So at the time, they were the 3 largest public companies in the Tampa Bay area. And he'd worked in the finance department with all of them. And he was very methodical about what he did. And he made me agree to 2 things at the time. And it didn't seem super significant that I agreed to these things back then. But it is, because it's really become part of our DNA today and the way we run the business. He said, Barry, you have to agree to 2 things. The first is that we're going to take a metrics-driven approach to absolutely everything we do in every department in the company. And the second thing is that our goal with each department will always be to be best in class. We should do things as well or better than anyone in the business, or we shouldn't be here. So I agreed to those 2 things, and again, not realizing the magnitude of what I was agreeing to, it really changed the way we ran the business. we measure stuff that nobody measures. And you know, our reporting process and our you know, the key performance indicators that you would know, you know, are all in great shape relative to the industry. But the way we use data today, and you know, the way we dig into and leverage business intelligence to make decisions is very unusual for a company of our size. And we take a lot of pride in the sophistication of that, taking that metrics-driven approach to the way we manage the business. So, so bringing Steve on was, you know, probably the best decision I've made in the 10 years I've had the company. And the team we've built out around him are really just, you know, it's a group of really high-performance execution machines. So 2008 and 2009 were really our rebuilding years, you know, getting that new team in place, getting the new processes and procedures in place. It resulted in, you know, some uncomfortable things, a lot of turnover in our operations team, a lot of turnover in our finance team. But again, our metrics now, as we measure them against anyone in our industry or even other industries, are, you know, absolutely best in class. And that's the platform we're continuing to build Vology off of today. So 2008, I think we did about 47 million in revenue. 2009, a little over 50. 2010 is when we kind of got back to growth because we had our, you know, that foundation was back together. We did about 70 million in 2010. Last year we did 90, and this year, because we acquired a company in December, we expect to do about 140 million dollars in revenue. So, you know, again, gone from $1 million in revenue in 2002 to 140 million. You know, expected revenues this year. So it's been a lot of fun. Enjoy going to work every day. I am obviously passionate about what we do. Now, I'm not necessarily passionate about selling, you know, pre-owned network equipment. I'm passionate about kind of the art of the deal. I'm passionate about building a growing organization. I'm passionate about building a great work environment for our employees. You know, we've been, you know, we've gotten a lot of growth awards over the years. We've been on the Inc. 500 or 5,000 list of the fastest growing private companies in the country for the last 7 years in a row. But that doesn't mean nearly as much to us as the fact that our employees have voted us one of the best places to work in Tampa Bay for the last 3 years. You know, we've created a great environment, you know, for folks to make, you know, not just have a job, but have a career and, you know, great living. We pay, you know, significantly above the average wage for the county. So, you know, these are things we take an awful lot of pride in. And, you know, that's what drives our results. You know, we've got everybody at the organization kind of rowing in the same direction, and, you know, it shows in everything we do. So, so that's how we got here today, to speak to, you know, passion and perseverance. You know, the perseverance piece. I am definitely a persistent guy. To tell you I guess a persistent story. Back in 2006, I mentioned we made an acquisition. There's a company based right here in Oldsmar called One Nation Technologies at the time. We had previously really just sold network equipment, mostly Cisco stuff, switches, routers, security devices, that was it. But with the convergence of voice and data, you know, we had more and more customers asking for IP phones and IP phone systems, so we wanted to, you know, kind of acquire the competency of, you know, acquire that competency, and there happened to be a company here in town. I'd heard that the owner of the company, you know, ran a couple, 3 different businesses, was more interested in one particular business than this one, so I started calling him. And I started calling him, leaving him messages, and just trying to get a call back. And, you know, first week I started calling, I called him every day that week, so 5 days in a row I called him, no return messages. The following week I called him 5 days in a row, called him every day, different times. I didn't know what his schedule was like, so one day I'd call in the morning, another day I'd call midday, another day in the afternoon, and we just keep trying to, you know, catch him off guard, or maybe he'd pick up the phone. I didn't know if he had caller ID and heard something bad about me and didn't like me, or, I mean, I don't know why I couldn't get through to him. So after 26 consecutive days of trying to get Rick on the phone, the receptionist said, "You've been calling every day for a while. You might be trying to reach the wrong person. Rick doesn't really work here. He's kind of an absentee owner. You probably want to talk to David. David runs the show." I'm like, wow. So, so I got in touch with David, and like within 7 days, we had, you know, we sketched out a deal that made sense for everybody, and we were able to move forward with it. So what would have happened if I wasn't calling every day for 26 days? Probably nothing. Yeah, probably nothing. Turns out he didn't work there. He didn't check his voicemails. I mean, everything I looked said he did. You know, the state of Florida still showed him as the, you know, the CEO. Their website still showed him as the guy in charge. You know, everything supported that Rick should have been there to answer the phone, or at least listen to his voicemail messages. But he wasn't. So, but you know, they talk about persistence, perseverance. You know, that one example of just kind of the way we roll at Vology. So. That's it. And then performance, to speak about performance, I mentioned we take a metrics-driven approach to absolutely everything we do. When you talk about performance, you talk about, there's financial performance, but there's sales performance, there's, every department that we have, we measure our performance. I know how many pieces of equipment our testing lab can test on a daily basis. I actually know how many pieces of equipment each individual tester in that lab can test on average on an hourly basis. I mean, really break everything down to a metric to make sure that we're operating at at a good capacity, and those metrics from a performance standpoint go across the company. The cool thing is about that is you say, wow, I don't want to micromanage my people. The reality is when you're telling them what you expect from them at that level of detail, they appreciate that. They actually know what's expected of them every day at that point, or every hour inside of every day, and that's a good thing. Number one complaint from employees is, well, not at Vology, but it's just in global employees, is they don't really know exactly what's expected of them on a daily basis. And if there's a benchmark you give them and they exceed that, you can recognize them for that. And hey, you're doing a great job. And these are good things. So when we talk about performance and metrics, it's not just how profitable you are. It's not just how, what your revenues are, what your gross profit is. You can apply that to to just about every department. In the finance department, maybe it's your days sales outstanding. That tells you how well you're collecting your money, what a good job your people in your receivables department are doing, or your days payable outstanding, how efficiently you're paying your bills, and your days of supply. In our case, we have a lot of inventory, so we manage our days of supply of inventory within a very tight range because that's where the risk in our business is. There are metrics you can apply to to every department and every business, pretty much without exception. So from a performance space, we really focus on the metrics and communicate them, in a good, effective way to our folks. So so that's a little background. Sound all right? All right. So yeah.
Do you have a single platform for building those metrics on, or is this all homegrown, or what do you use for the metrics?
Okay, we've starting in 2006. We had built our own CRM system. And we started expanding in 2006 our CRM system to actually be our enterprise business platform. It sits on top of Great Plains, so we use Great Plains just for its GL functionality because we didn't want to rebuild that. But 90% of what we track, we're able to track in that system. We actually have 3 full-time developers on staff that maintain and grow that system, so it's not an out-of-the-box software. For business intelligence, we use something called ClickView. That sits on top of a data warehouse that has 1-day-old data in it that allows us to do more with that data and create new dashboards. So we do use that as the one kind of out-of-the-box platform we use to manage stuff from a business intelligence standpoint. But most of our stuff, which is unusual, is homegrown. So.
How do you get more business?
Well, to get more business, you need a constant pipeline of 2 things: new customers and new sales reps to service those customers. So, it's a core belief that we have. I'm in an industry where, it's pretty big. Even though we're $140 million, we're not a very large company in our space. IT spending globally is something like $3 trillion a year. So, so we're pretty small relative to that. But we have, we have a very active and aggressive sales organization. Today we have 65 sales reps. Those sales reps on a daily basis make between 3,000 and 4,000 phone calls a day, send out another 5,000 to 6,000 emails a day. So we're touching, do the math, it's 10,000 customer touches a day, 50,000 a week, 200,000 a month, 2.5 million a year. It extrapolates out from there. The key to that is managing every day. So, as long as we're hitting our daily metrics, the weekly, monthly, and quarterly and annually ones will fall out.
Do you have a similar group of acquisition reps that are out there trying to find new equipment? Because you got to have something to sell.
We do. We have a team of 12 people in our purchasing department. Now, the leads come from the same sales organization. So our value proposition to our customers is, hey, we can help you stretch your IT budget from buying stuff from us, but we can also turn your surplus stuff into cash. So the relationships with the customers are both sides. We're buying equipment out of the networks and selling equipment into the networks. So the sales reps then, kind of lob those opportunities over to our purchasing department, who determine, which stuff we should be putting on the shelves and which we shouldn't. So it's a good question, though.
How does the Bayshore technology acquisition fit your culture, and how's that going to fit in with what you're doing? So
how does the Bayshore Technologies acquisition fit into our culture and what we're doing? Up until December of this, last year, Vology's primary our core competency is really selling the network side of people's network infrastructure, switching, routing, security, IP phones, IP phone systems. We did not sell a lot of servers and storage primarily because we didn't have competencies in delivering virtualization services. If you're selling servers and storage, you've got to sell the virtualization with it, be able to do those installation and configurations for your customers. Bayshore has probably the most well-respected virtualization practice in the Southeast U.S., so bringing them on was really complementary. I sat down with Peter Anderson about 6 months ago. Someone suggested that we have lunch to talk about how our two companies might work closer together, and those conversations devolved. The more layers of the onion that we peeled back, the more we realized how complementary our product offerings were, how complementary our cultures were, and most importantly, our philosophies. We both believe, look, take care of the customer's problems. The customer comes first, and the rest will take care of itself. Our customer satisfaction rating at Vology is north of 95%. Theirs is a similar number at Bayshore. We've been a customer of Bayshore, so we were pretty familiar with how competent they were. When we had to refresh our server and storage infrastructure, we didn't put an RFP out. We just called Bayshore and brought them in to take care of it for us.
There's an element of where there's a heavy service side where it sounds like maybe you were a little more product in a way, product
Correct.
Sales. So that's always an interesting dynamic, switching from the product side to the servicing side. So, which is a transition.
It is.
Our company made, and that was an interesting journey. So I was, just curious of how you anticipate what you guys can bring to the service side of the industry. So
the good news is the feedback from our customers has been overwhelmingly positive. It seems like our customers, and we have a lot of common customers, well, not a ton, but the few common customers that we had were very excited about the two of us coming together, and those other customers that just learned what the other company brought to the table seem to be excited about being able to do more business with each of us individually, which is a good thing. So it's really validated what we were expecting. So we're pretty early signs are good. So
will you leave them pretty much doing what they do on their side, or what's the integration process like? Is there a lot of integration and a lot of things that you'll influence with what they're doing, or do you leave them to be kind of have an autonomy to themselves?
No, I think long term we want to get everybody under one roof, acting as one organization. We have some logistical issues with that related to the amount of space that we have, but the good folks here at the Upper Tampa Chamber are trying to help me with that situation to make sure we don't go too far from here. So if I can stay in Oldsmar, I'd certainly like to. So, but it's the integration is a 6-month to 1 year process, really going department by department. So the first step is kind of the finance department has to be the back office needs to be integrated pretty immediately because of requirements that we have with our lenders. So so that's going to happen first, and then the IT side of the house, and then sales will be the last piece that gets integrated. That's just kind of it seems like the most logical order for us to to do that. So,
Barry, you mentioned that your passion is in the art of the deal, and you also mentioned customer satisfaction. What would you say are Vology's core values that you guys live by on a daily basis that make sure that you address the customer satisfaction issue?
Well, so our number one core value is to have a positive winning attitude at all times, and because that's very important to us. And if you start with that as a foundation, a lot of stuff falls out from that. If you're a positive person when you're on the phone with the customer is probably going to have a good experience on the phone with you. If you are a negative person and you're on the phone with the customer is probably not going to have a good experience with you. We talk about winning. We're obviously very competitive. We're in a very highly competitive industry, so there's a competitive nature to the environment internally, which fosters a healthy competition inside the organization. But that's really the core. We remaining dedicated to our employees is another core value. I mentioned we want to make sure we're paying at or above market for all the positions that we have. We ask a lot of our employees, but we want to give a lot back. From a training perspective, our goal long term is to invest twice as much training our employees as the average organization does. I think the target 2 years out is something like 80 hours a year of training for each employee that would be available to them. So we really want to invest in our people with the expectation that good things are going to happen as a result of that. Developing mutually beneficial relationships with our business partners. Our business partners are not just our customers, but our vendors, because remember, we have two sides of every transaction. So we want to make sure we treat our vendors fairly, we pay them on time. Paying on time is very important in our space because a lot of guys are running small businesses and they're undercapitalized. And making sure that we're delivering best bang for the buck solutions to our customers is a core part of what we do. When someone has everyone has an IT budget, everyone wants more IT budget. We find them ways, creative ways to stretch those budgets, and that works well. So the value proposition that we deliver to our customers is it's important to them, and it's been well received. So,
Barry, was there a point during your growth where you determined that you needed to step away as being the rainmaker sales guy, if that ever happened? And then you recognize you needed to bring somebody else in to do that function? And if so, what were the things that you were looking for?
So the question, was there a point where I had to remove myself as the rainmaker from a sales perspective? In 2002, when we did $1 million in revenue, I was the only salesperson. In 2003, when we did $4 million in revenue, I was $3 million of it. In 2004, when we did $7 million, I was half of it. In 2005, when we did $10 million, I was 0. So that was the same year that I went out and hired the wrong management team, was the year that I wanted to move those customer relationships from me onto the sales team that we put together at that point in time. So it was a pretty hard line. It was 1 month. I started making introductions between the customers and who their new rep was going to be. I helped them with the transition and any issues they had through that year of 2005, but I haven't had direct sales responsibility with customers since then. Now, I made a lot of mistakes as it relates to, from a sales management perspective. Most common mistake anyone makes is take your top sales guy and try and turn him into a sales manager. That's a really bad idea, and I made that mistake like 3 times. So that was one of the ones that I like to say I learned from my mistake. I should say try and learn from my mistakes the first time you make them. But I thought it was the person, not the concept. So that's been tough. Sales management in our organization has been really one of the most difficult things for us to fill. The guy that's running it today, John O'Shea, he's our SVP of sales. He came from Tech Data. He ran the HP business inside of Tech Data and very successfully grew it to become Tech Data's #1 product line. He's been with us 6 months now, and now it's no longer Tech Data's #1 product line. So he's clearly, that's all because of him, I'm assuming. That'd be a good assumption, right? I don't know. I realized, I wasn't a good CEO. I made some massive mistakes, and so I started, going through a lot of, my own re-education. Some of it was with peer groups. So I was involved in some local CEO forums locally, where you'd sit down for half a day with 6 or 7 other CEOs in a similar industry, where you'd help each other solve problems and talk about best practices, talked about the way they've dealt with stuff. I became a member of YPO. It's been an important organization for me for the last 5 or 6 years. It's the Young Presidents Organization, same thing, great network of people that want to help one another. I've gone through a number of trainings on high performance leadership. Through some local training firms here. I've taken behavioral-based interviewing skill classes. I've become I have a pretty big appetite for reading. So what I'm reading on a daily basis has migrated more to reading about and learning about leadership as opposed to running a business. And I'm not reading books learning how to use Excel better. I'm reading books how to become a better leader, which most of it just comes down to good communication and and walking the walk as opposed to just talking the talk. So if you do the things you say you're going to do and you lead by example, your folks are going to respect you and follow you. And I feel we've done a pretty good job with that to date. But it was a pretty big transformation. Again, first 4 years, I was the sales guy. And anybody that's trying to start a business, you have to be. You have to be the sales guy. You have to be passionate about what you're selling, because if you can't sell it, you're not going to be able to hire people and train them how to sell it. So it's, you have to be sales guy #1 if you're starting, in my opinion. So.
I'm kind of interested. It seems like your business is based on scaling up. And with your acquisition of Bayshore, or merger, whatever, there's an awful lot of people who've been in the storage business for a long time who are kind of wallowing. So So are there a lot of opportunities, and is it your goal to grow even bigger?
Well,
out of this market, just start becoming more of a national force?
we so what are our goals related to growth? We're definitely planning on continuing to grow, but to clarify, our customer base is national. So we have customers in every state in 30 countries. 80% of our business is in the U.S., but again, most of those relationships have been very product-centric as opposed to service-centric. So being able to take Bayshore's model, plug it into some other markets where we have large concentrations of customers is pretty appealing to us. Our customers are telling us they want more full-service vendors that add value to the relationship and put them in a position where they have one throat to choke. That's what folks are looking for in our industry. So when something goes wrong, they don't have finger pointing between vendors, that somebody's going to take responsibility for the situation. And if you're a mid-market company, we're in a good position to be able to do that for you. Just to tell you what our customer typically looks like, our customer's typically an organization with 100 to 2,000 employees. We certainly have larger customers here locally because we have so many resources here locally, but our typical customers is, that's how we define the mid-market, 100 to 2,000 employees. And now that could be any type of organization. It could be a hospital, it could be a municipality, it could be an enterprise, it could be a school. Anything that falls into that category really becomes part of Vology's sweet spot. Why? Because they're big enough that they have some IT staff on hand to take care of problems, to move things around, but they're still small enough where they're going to be creative in the way they approach their IT spend and their IT budgets. When you get into at the Fortune 500 level, there's no the creativity is with the analysts and the way they're presenting the financials. It's not the way they're budgeting.
I've enjoyed your talk a lot, and I have some takeaways from my perspective. But as I listen to what you've said, I hear almost a formula. You could say a formula for small businesses out there. Number one, focus on quality and be the best. Number two, come up with metrics to measure everything and processes that make sense. Grow to a point where you can then begin to maybe diversify your product or service offerings and reduce your risk. I don't know if that's by design or by evolution, but does that resonate with you, and is that something that you plan or would see continuing, maybe further diversification in your offerings as your company continues to mature?
That's an interesting question. I'm not sure. I think the piece that you're missing is that in the evolution of the business changes. I mean, our business model has changed, pretty significantly a couple times. We changed our name from Network Liquidators to Vology for a reason. When we started the business, we were collecting, equipment from failed businesses and remarketing it basically to resellers. By 2005, our customer base had evolved where the majority of the customers then were actually the people that were buying the equipment and putting it into their network. So now we're selling to the actual end users of the equipment. That in itself was a huge change because what the customers were expecting from us were very different. I'll give you a silly example. If I sold a switch to another dealer and I didn't put rack mounts on it, or I forgot the rack mounts in the box, it's no big deal. Dealer goes to the shelf and they pick up a pair of rack mounts and they put it on. I send an end user that same piece of equipment without the rack mounts, you get a phone call going, hey, what the hell? What do you expect me to do with this? I've got it, I can't put it in the rack, I got no screws, whatever else. It's a whole different problem. So, from an operational standpoint, our operations had to evolve to deliver a more consistent, higher quality product to the ultimate end users, which was good because it made us better at what we do, but that was a huge change in the business. Then we added product lines after that, where we expanded into the IP phones and the IP phone systems. That added a whole nother complexity. It didn't dawn on us that everything we sold sat in typically had sat in a climate-controlled environment, was touched once when it was installed, touched one more time when it was taken out of service. We didn't have to deal with makeup on stuff. When you deal with phones, there's a whole nother problem because people are touching it and feeling it. So that was a whole nother evolution of our process and how you deal with warranties on those things and the way you communicate to the customers. And then as the company grew and got beyond that, we started selling authorized stuff and new equipment. So we used to just sell our certified pre-owned products. Today, the certified pre-owned products only make up 30% of our sales. So it's a big part of our value proposition, but now 2/3 of what we're selling is new equipment. A lot of it's, you know, hand in hand with the, you know, the original equipment manufacturers. So, you know, that's, again, that was the catalyst behind the name change in 2010, because I was calling customers, and the customers were saying, well, you know, to back up, I make it a practice of calling. It used to be once a quarter, now it's about every 6 months, where I'll call a couple hundred customers personally, and they were customers that we lost a deal with in the previous quarter. So I'd call them up. I'd say, hey, Steve, I know that Ronnie was working with you on an opportunity. Ronnie said you guys opted to go with a different vendor. I'd just like to know what we can do better next time to put ourselves in a better position to earn your business. And the feedback I got was fabulous. So the feedback back in 2009 was, well, we decided to buy a piece of new equipment instead of pre-owned. I said, well, I could see we quoted you both new and pre-owned equipment. Why, was it a price issue on the new equipment? They said, no, we just weren't comfortable buying a piece of new equipment from a liquidator. I'm like, seriously? You know, we've been doing business with you for 5 years, you know, hundreds of thousands of dollars of business. The name's going to stop you from buying a piece of new equipment. So that was the catalyst behind us going out and changing the name. So, you know, being able to be, you know, to adapt to change and to know that, you know, listen, if I was trying to execute the business plan I wrote in 2002, I'd be long out of business. You know, as we've grown and evolved, you've got to be adaptable, you've got to be able to change, and you can't put that into a formula. So, you know, it's constantly challenging, you know, challenging your assumptions, making sure you're evolving from, you know, from a strategy standpoint and from a process standpoint.
And I guess just a follow-up to that, so it sounds like you all have reinvented every couple of years, whether it's a segment of your business or an overhaul, and I'm assuming that you're going to continue that trend, maybe proactively or reactively, as the future goes on?
Well, I hope it's more proactively than reactively. But I mean, think about what we just did. I mean, we're right now in the middle of what's probably the most significant transformation that we've made in our 10 or 11 year history with the acquisition of Bayshore Technologies. You know, we're now more of a full service IT infrastructure offering for our customers. There's really nobody we can't compete with now. So we put ourselves in a really nice position from that perspective in that market that I was talking about. You know, we feel that we're putting ourselves in a position where we can be more full service to our customers. Those relationships are going to become more intimate. You know, we want to make sure we maintain the same type of customer satisfaction we've had historically, and you know, this is going to be a big transformation for us over the next 24 months. And I'm excited because it's cool. So,
Barry, I'm a sales guy too in the technology industry, so I kind of know a little bit about what you guys go through. But you mentioned touches and touch points in the industry. I got a question, two sides to it. One, touch points. When you try and call somebody nowadays, voicemail, you got email, people can ignore you very easily. And you mentioned 26 times you had to call somebody. That's one side. How do you guys deal with that? The other side of the question is, we also have technology that really provides us some information from a social networking standpoint that we never had back in 2000. You know, so how do you guys utilize technology, and how do you get around technology to run your business more effectively?
You know, I mean, it goes to the middle thing, persistence. I mean, it's, you know, we're going to keep, you know, we want to make sure we stay in touch with people and that they know we're here. Even if we're not getting them on the phone, leaving a voicemail is important, because, you know, if a project comes up, you know, and they haven't heard your voice in 6 months, they've probably forgotten about you. So as long as we're just even leaving reminder, you know, voicemail saying, hey, we're here for you. If you guys have any projects coming up that you think Vology might be able to help you with, let us know. You know, we take that creative approach, can probably find you a way to, you know, to fill some budget gaps, or, you know, turn some surplus equipment into cash. It depends on the customer, the relationship, what we know about the network, but staying in touch with them to make sure we've got, you know, a lot of touch points is part of, you know, it's just part of our system. So we have, you know, it's a touch system effectively, and, you know, it just works to keep us, to make sure we stay top of mind. If there's an RFP going out, we want to make sure that we're participating in it. And, you know, the more regularly that we're in touch with our, you know, with our customers, the more likely it is for that to happen. So.
Barry, you said something that was interesting to me, and that is your sweet spot is between 100 and 2,000 employees, and it represents, U.S. represents 80% of the business. And I assume that you will continue, there's more than enough businesses around that you can continue this, particularly overseas. What concept do you have when a larger organization, substantially larger than you are, comes to you and says, now we want to have you work with us, because that would change, in my mind, your entire philosophy, because what applies in one direction does not necessarily apply in the other, particularly these large companies that have that many employees, that many more millions of dollars of sales. How would you perceive you would be able to plan and work with that?
Well, so we have some Fortune 500 customers, especially locally. So Jabil Circuit's a good example. Jabil's had a tough time keeping, a certain type of engineer on staff that, specializes in Citrix. So, we do staff augmentation for Jabil for Citrix engineers. So in large organizations, there's still a possibility or a likelihood that we have certain resources, that they can use. WellCare is another great example of a local company that we do a bunch of business with, kind of the same situation. Sometimes they have issues or projects that just need to be outsourced. We're going to be able to move quicker than IBM Global Services is. If they need somebody there in 3 days, you're not getting that from IBM, but you can get that from Vology. If you have a lot of times, so in 2010, some interesting stuff happened where we were coming out of the recession, and the manufacturers had ramped down their production. So there were supply chain problems. Cineverse, who's do you know Cineverse in Tampa? It was a spin-off from Verizon. They're about $1 billion company now. They're based up in North Tampa. Cineverse had never bought stuff from us before. They were trying to buy a Cisco 7206 router from Cisco. They needed it tomorrow. Cisco had a 4-week lead time on that part. They happened to call us up because we had a persistent sales guy that was leaving messages there every couple of weeks for 2 years. And they said, hey, let's just give it a shot. They called Jason and they said, how long would it take you to bring us, to get us a 7206 VXR? And he said, well, with traffic, we could probably have one there in about 45 minutes. And we did. We went to the warehouse. No joke. We went to the warehouse. We built it. We drove it over to them. We delivered it. They couldn't believe it. So it was the value proposition that we were able to deliver that separated ourselves from the competitor. In this case, it was the Cisco rep, and they couldn't compete with that. Today, Cineverse is our largest customer. It all started with us solving a problem for them, when there was a supply chain issue. About 2 months ago, on 2 o'clock on the Saturday afternoon, Tom Canalungo, one of our sales reps, got an email from a customer in Houston, Texas. It was a power company. They needed a 4-port 10 gigabit card for their Cisco router. They wanted to know if there's any way we can get one to them on Monday. And we said, well, we missed the shipping cut. We actually ship on Saturdays too, which is unusual, but our shipping cutoff's 1 o'clock. So it was an hour past that. So what Tom did was he got in touch with someone at our warehouse. We had the card that they were looking for in stock. We drove it to the airport, stuck it on a Southwest Airlines flight to Hobby Airport in Houston. We told the customer to go pick it up. He had his card at 9 o'clock that night. That's a way we can behave in ways that that the larger companies, our competitors, can't. We're just nimble that way. We take how do you solve solve a customer's problem on a Saturday afternoon? I mean that goes a long way. So that's just part of the way we we want to service our customers. That's why we have a 97% customer satisfaction rating. It's that type of effort that we deliver to our customers to differentiate us from our competitors. So those are 2 good stories, right? You know what? I didn't answer the second half of your question before, so let me grab that first. So how do we leverage technology? I'm a big advocate of LinkedIn, probably for different reasons than you might think. A lot of people want to manage relationships that way. In our case, we use it primarily to see who knows who. So we want to know which customers of ours know which prospects of ours. So we can call the prospect and say, hey, call Andy at Hancock Bank. He'll tell you what a great job we do for him. I can see you guys know one another. You're right down the street from one another there in New Orleans, Louisiana. And we really, we leverage it that way. And we have tools that map stuff like that out for us to figure out, from a rep's perspective, who knows who. Sometimes when we're distributing leads or incoming opportunities, we'll distribute them based on, who's got the closest LinkedIn connection to the decision maker at an organization, because they're going to be more likely to be able to refer, to get a positive referral from a customer to help us, penetrate that account. Our struggle is getting into an account the first time. Once we get into someone's supply chain, we tend to stay there, and that's really been the core of our growth over the last 10 years, because our first-year customer average spend with us is $7,000 or $8,000, and our fifth-year customer average spend with us is $50,000. So they grow over time as they become more comfortable with us as a vendor in their supply chain. The relationships grow. We're at a point where 90% of our revenue in any given quarter is from existing customers. So, while we don't have, so it's a very recurring, relationship that grows over time. So.
I was going to ask another question. Fascinating with the nimbleness. You've had meteoric growth, which sounds like that's going to continue. How do you stay nimble as you get larger and larger?
Core value number one. Hire people that have a positive winning attitude at all times. Hire people that have attitude and aptitude, and the rest will take care of itself. I mean, that's a big part of it. I consider my job now as the chief roadblock remover. So, we just don't want to create bureaucracy. It drives me crazy. So we're pretty passionate about making sure that we don't overcomplicate people's jobs. We really do empower people to make decisions. We don't micromanage. While we report on a lot of stuff and we can see a lot of metrics, we publish the metrics so we don't have to manage the metrics. So it would be embarrassing if I was a sales rep and everyone could see that I've only called 30% of my customers in the last 30 days. So we publish a call rating where everyone can see what percentage of your customers you called in the last 30 days. So we use, we leverage technology to do stuff like that to, again, create incredibly the high energy, positive atmosphere, but also, foster a little competitiveness as well. So it's, again, I'm in front of the employees almost every day. I know Jerry's been to our, we have a daily sales meeting for 5 minutes every day, or I jump up and down, say a few cool things, and everyone gets excited and they clap, and then we go back to work and sell more stuff. But that's, it's just part of the culture. So, culture kicks strategy's ass. So.
So with the Bayshore, one of the pieces is you're going from selling routers, switches, networking gear, servers. You'll have the opportunity to move away from providing infrastructure to providing it as a virtualized hosted environment for your customers, and I assume that would be directly to your customers. Would there be any plans in the future of building that infrastructure out and then creating a resell to the channel type environment? Like, I don't know if you're familiar with Artisan, but that would be a comparison.
Yeah, so we actually have a small MSP practice. So I mentioned that our core customers have 100 to 2,000 employees. Well, what do we do with the people with less than 100 employees? We take over their infrastructure. So that's what we do. So that's how we treat those customers. So that's it's a different product offering that kind of stands on its own, but that's exactly exactly what we do for those customers. Actually, anything under, if they're in 100 to 200, it depends on the complexity of their situation, but under 100 for sure. That's how we try.
That directly to them through working with, on that small side, then they're typically working with a small systems integrator,
right.
IT service guy. Would you provide a channel resell for them to bring to those customers?
I hadn't really thought about that. I would ask, that'd be a question for Winston. I don't know if any of those relationships are through resellers or if they're all direct. I just don't know that answer. Sorry. Good question though.
Barry, you mentioned training for your employees, and I want to say congratulations on that, because a lot of companies sometimes don't value the importance of providing that training for the employees. And there are state grants, obviously, and local grants as well that are available for you to take advantage of to help you offset some of those costs. So I want to help you with that. Can you tell us a little bit about what kind of training that your employees go through? Because you have a mixture of types of folks that work for you. It's very heavy in sales and stuff, but could you share with us a little bit about what are the kinds of trainings that they go through?
It's all over the map. So, we have a large engineering team as well. So, a lot of trade certifications, for guys to become more competent in either selling or on the engineering side of the various manufacturers. So whether it's Cisco, Juniper, Brocade, VMware, Microsoft, all of the vendors whose stuff we sell have training that's pretty specific. We have our IT development team. Those guys have different training desires. Our director of software development went for Scrum Master training, because we use a agile Scrum methodology of software development. So, we sent him away for 2 weeks to go through, to become a Scrum Master. We have, other folks that are moving up. Maybe they started as administrators and want to move into product management. We'll send them for PMP training. We've had one person go through that last year and get her PMP certification, and we're going to have another one go through that this year. So it really depends on, where they are in the organization and what they want. And we want to help people invest in what they're passionate about. If it's a guy in our warehouse and he wants to become an engineer, I'll send him to school to become a CCNA, and he can ultimately move up through the organization to do something else. As long as they're passionate about it, and it's something they want to do, we'll help them map out a career path and support them, in pretty much any direction that we think makes sense.
Barry, thank you very, very much.
Hey, no problem.